My name is Ronald Hummins, founder of the movement, A State of Emergency on Childhood Trauma and Trauma Activists. This movement, fueled by the tireless efforts of my team, the Childhood Trauma Emergency Group, in collaboration with the Tri-State Trauma Network, has been a tireless effort to make childhood trauma qualify for the emergency declaration. After the suicide death of my son, I kicked off this movement with a 48-hour hunger strike in 2018 in the freezing cold on the steps of the State House. I honestly didn't know what I was doing. I knew very little about activism and even less about politics. But what I did know was that childhood trauma was a systematic issue and policies were what got us here, so policies was going to get us out. Most of you all know the story of my son, Trey Pierre, and how he committed suicide by cop. That unfortunately led to the death of Officer Kim. But what most of y'all don't know is his excessive caseloads with Child Protective Services for abandonment, neglect, and abuse. Now, I've always condemned his actions on how he chose to commit suicide, but the circumstances that led up to it are very relevant. Despite my efforts, fighting for custody for my son ended in failure. I fought for the safety of my son against a system that had the power and authority to dictate my role in my child's life. My failure led to him living a life of trauma and abuse. I created this movement for the thousands of children who don't have a voice. Children from Black and poor white communities who are constituents or consumers. See, Black Lives Matter don't organize marches for children killed under the care of Child Protective Services. We don't see their names hashtagged on social media. But once their trauma expresses itself, oh, then their names matter, but only to sensationalize it on the news. We have a system that will penalize our children for the expression of their trauma, while at the same time slow to put a system in place to heal and prevent. The Ohio Board of Education wrote a policy that laid the foundation for a school-to-prison pipeline that says that a zero-tolerance policy for all violent acts in school, regardless of all underlying trauma. Cincinnati Public Schools took it a step further. They hired Cincinnati police to be resource officers in the schools. Criminal files were created on these children who violated the zero-tolerance policy. This policy affects 78% of Black males, while they only make up 12% of the population. And let me remind you, our children live in a food desert. These are basic human rights that we're asking for. The Declaration of Independence says that all Americans have a right to life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. But how? If most of our Black and poor white communities are stuck in survival mode. I paid a great price for launching this movement. I lost everything, ranging from my income, reputation, and even my freedom. I was falsely incarcerated for menacing the girlfriend of a Cincinnati police officer. And after my trial, I was fully acquitted after evidence showed that I was lied and targeted. But before I had my day in court, I spent 2 days and denied basic human needs of a mat and toilet paper. I had to use my t-shirt to wipe myself after I used the bathroom after my request was denied twice for toilet paper. And I still stand here on the battlefield. Because I know if we don't fight for our children, they'll be the ones to pay the price. After much correspondence by email and text messaging, Vice Mayor Kearney is the only city official that tried to work with my team. But she couldn't do it alone. Her efforts failed in trying to get council to move. This movement has never been about me. It's about healing and liberation, not just for the children who are here today, but for millions of generations to come. This movement will create generational healing for entire communities. Even though the name of this movement is a state of emergency on childhood trauma, this is also for that 30-year-old sitting in an Ohio prison whose name was overlooked by multiple Child Protective Service documents, forced to grow up as a broken adult and navigate through life dysregulated. See, there's a model out there that we can duplicate to actually fix the problem of childhood trauma. See, when opioids started affecting communities with the overdose and the addictions, our government didn't just leave it to wraparound programs to fix it. We declared a state of emergency on opioids. It's time to give us our Narcan, restore our lives, heal our communities. We can declare a state of emergency on everything else except for what directly affects us. This lawsuit, along with human rights violation complaints filed with the Department of Justice and the UN, is our last-ditch efforts to fight against the status quo and make childhood trauma qualify for the emergency declaration. Thank you.